Welcome to session 8 in the PayPal story. So let's start with a recap of session 7. So in session 7, we talked about how PayPal finally managed to monetize its very large user base and introduce fees for sellers. We also talked about competition, and we talked about how PayPal was successful in raising $225 million of equity. Now, in PayPal, as you can imagine, after a merger, after such a turbulent time with so many things happening, like initially in X.com, Elon was the CEO. Then we had Bill Harris, who was the CEO for a little while. Then Bill Harris left. Then Elon came back. Then Elon left. And Peter Thiel took over as interim CEO and finally became the CEO. Now, I had somewhat divergent views at that time, and who knows whether my views were correct or not. Maybe they weren't. But mine were shaped based on my experience with PayPal. And in a sense, what I wanted PayPal to do was build a private label version, a white label version of PayPal, which banks around the world could retain. So in addition to PayPal doing its own business, then it would be somewhat similar to Visa, MasterCard, where the banks could be the issuers of like PayPal. Now that may be an idea which was good. It hasn't happened for so long. PayPal has done fine as an independent company. It's become a $180 billion company. So maybe my idea was not the right thing at that point in time. Maybe at some point in time it will be the right thing, and who knows what will happen in the future for PayPal. But I was pushing my ideas, I guess, a bit too hard. So there were like these divergent views, and probably Peter Thiel, who was the CEO, was kind of getting upset with me as to why, when he has all these other issues to deal with, why am I kind of trying to push this view which he's not supporting a lot. So also by this point in time, which was early 2001, a lot of my knowledge had been absorbed by the rest of the people in PayPal. And as such, I was no longer critical to PayPal. So I was not required. And so, I was asked to leave. And I had 3 months accelerated vesting. So I left a fair number of PayPal shares, which were not vested on the table. So I, of course, was quite upset, because I felt I'd contributed a lot to PayPal. And it was not all that fair for PayPal to ask me to leave. But I also now, in hindsight, see the Peter Thiel point of view. I was from the X.com side. I was not part of his inner circle. He didn't need me. He felt I was being irritating, whatever the reasons. But I was asked to go. And then when that happened, I consulted Elon, I consulted Bill Harris, saying, should I fight this or should I let it go? And they all advised me to let it go because I could have fought it, because I was like older, I was an Asian, I could have alleged all kinds of things. But I'm glad I didn't, because life is too short. So the wealth that I ended up creating with PayPal, Anita, kind of my wife, stayed on, though she was also quite upset and wanted to leave, but she decided to stay on. And she stayed on, right up to 2003, December, when we finally moved to India. So she ended up staying on much longer time than I did. So now with PayPal, it went and did an IPO almost soon after I left. And So for the IPO, when you try and do an IPO, then a company called CertCo came and challenged PayPal that they had infringed patents. Finally, the suit was settled. There were also regulatory challenges because PayPal had operated without a license for a very long time, but before it IPO'd, it got licenses in various places. But there were some states which created regulatory problems for PayPal. And PayPal was also in various kinds of businesses. PayPal was being used for gambling to a certain extent, pornography, and various things. So it had quite a few hurdles to get over as it IPO'd, but it managed to successfully IPO. And on February 2002, which is a very short time for a startup, it IPO'd, and I think at the price of $22 a share, it was worth about 800 million. So I had joined X.com when I think it was worth 10 million or 20 million, maybe. I forget exactly, but now it was worth 800 million, and my shares were worth 40 times as much for whatever shares that were vested. Now, very soon after that, just 6 months as a public company, eBay acquired PayPal. And I mean, if you look on the internet, there is all kinds of things as to PayPal should not have sold to eBay. Why did PayPal sell to eBay? But I think David Sachs and others have explained it quite well, that PayPal had a fairly exhaustive team, having run through lots of challenges. It had a very high dependency on eBay. And while it had beaten off Bill Point and had built something which was quite amazing, it was not arrogant enough to say that, look, if eBay really gets its act together and other people get their act together, they cannot create a problem for PayPal. So for a variety of reasons, it made sense for PayPal to agree to get acquired for $1.5 billion. So in 6 months, the stock price kind of doubled in a way from 800 million to $1.5 billion. So I was feeling quite happy, though I was no longer part of PayPal, but my stocks had gone up. And, now they have gone up like 100 times, more than 100 times from that 1.5 billion. Though, of course, it's been almost 18 years since eBay acquired PayPal. But still, that's a pretty decent return. So it just shows you that if you end up not necessarily being a founder, but part of the founding team or a very early, and your startup is very successful, you can create enough wealth to be able to retire. So in the next session, I'm going to cover, so I'm just going to do 2 more sessions. So one is going to be about Citibank and PayPal, right? So there are some interesting learnings for large companies from the PayPal story. So I'd like to tell that story and bring out some of those learnings. And the other is about, what made PayPal successful. We've covered some of these in there earlier, but I just want to talk about 2 things there. One is called the infinity equation, and the other is the PayPal mafia. So with that, I will conclude the PayPal story in 2 more sessions. So that will make 10 sessions, and then move on to what I did after I left PayPal while I was still in the US. Thank you for listening to me.